I'm Seth Leinenbach. I work with Superior Ag out of our Dale location in agronomy sales. We're going to talk a little about seed. Appreciate everybody coming. If you have we're supposed to make sure the key takeaways farm, like Tom said in the last group, we can wink at you real big so you guys know, write that one down, but make sure somebody fills that out. That's a good key to getting some door prizes and stuff like that.
So I met most of you guys here. I'm Tom Sinnott. My role's actually a little bit different. It changed a couple months ago. So I cover the Northeast U.S. essentially for all the brands that Winfield handles, Cropland, DeKalb, Asgrow, all that. So I've gotten a little bit different perspective, getting some access to some of those things we'll go through here in a little bit. But Seth and I actually gave some of this talk last year, and it's going to be more important this year under constraints, right, for commodity prices. If corn's $6, you could go to Rural King and buy all your seed and you're going to make money, right? But the idea is we want to make as much as we can. Whenever you're looking at inputs, equipment, interest, all these other things, there's a lot more scrutiny on hybrid selection than there ever is in a $5 or $6 corn era. So that's what we want to go through today. So we look at selecting the right hybrid. You know, we actually had this slide last year, but we just wanted to highlight, you know, just because your neighbor really likes a hybrid, it may not be meant for you. Some of the hybrids, and Seth will dive deep into that later, but some of the hybrids will take up 60 to 70% of their nitrogen post-tassel, and we know what those hybrids are. So if you're a guy that does 100% pre-plant ammonia, unless you're doing a pretty salty rate and you're putting a stabilizer in there, that hybrid isn't going to get everything it needs because it's had some leaching. But then also we have hybrids that take up 70% of their nitrogen prior to tassel. So that's where it's going to fit. So make sure your seed guy is having those conversations, working with Superior Ag. They know all that stuff about it. So if you plan on changing something, this could change your seed selections. So make sure you communicate with that. But like you guys got this sign over here, if they're only talking to you about seed, it may be time to get a new seed company. In constrained markets on commodity prices, that's huge. So we talked about the nitrogen practices, management practices. We have some hybrids that don't kernel count really well, where they may be 40, 50 bushel ahead of what they kernel count because they express it in kernel depth. And so if you have somebody that doesn't manage their crop late, like some others, you could see that falter off a little bit where it's not going to get that full grain fill that you need with that kernel count. So that makes a big difference in hybrid selection. Price constraints, I'd say this every year. You know, if a guy knows you're going to hold them up on price or feet to the fire, they're going to reach in their bucket of tools and they're going to bring you some things that may be a little bit cheaper in their bag. They're still good products, but maybe not the best because they know that they're going to have to be extremely competitive competing against another seed company. So make sure whenever you're having these hybrid discussions, it's all about yield. And as soon as you get done with that, beat the crap out of them. Because, you know, I've been doing this 20 years and I've yet to have anybody in the room here tell me that I was too damn cheap on corn. I probably could have gigged them for another 20 bucks because they saw the value in it, right? It's all really expensive. Population comfort levels, that's kind of changed a little bit. Most of the area is now up. We had some situations of, 5-6 years ago where we still had some folks at 28,000 and some are up to 36, 38,000. We've seen that whole thing lift up. But it's still important if you like to plant 36, 38,000, you don't want a big flex hybrid because you're going to get so much tip back on it. You want a durable hybrid that is going to make a consistent ear size and you just get 38,000 of them instead of 32,000 of them. Planting and harvest time, obviously some of the varieties have better stalks than other late. If you go after your corn and you're going to dry it, you can get away from those, so you may have the best value in those hybrids.
So I'm going to go over our corn hybrid summary. Again, similar slide, but with updated data. And this is a big thank you to our precision team, our innovator club, all those guys that take time to do plots. As many of you know, it takes a lot of time to do a trial, a lot of time to do a plot. And when you go to a field day, typically this time of year for corn hybrids and soybean varieties, you typically see maybe 1 or 2 different plots in the local area. And that's kind of what a lot of the decisions made. Or maybe it's that plot that you're at that night when you're looking at a competitive brand. We take a lot of pride in this, and you can tell most of these hybrids are what we consider our core set. So there's 6 DeKalb hybrids, 6 Cropland hybrids, and then we go to a local Pioneer dealership and we ask them for 2 numbers that they would recommend going in these plot trials somewhere around 113 day and then 115 day, 116 day, and we let them kind of place or tell us what hybrid they want us to include in this. So we got our core hybrids here, but then we also have some experimental numbers as we look, and in Tom's new role, he's really going to be studying hybrids and stuff before we even get to see them. And we're blessed as we kind of go in the amount of trials we do that Winfield and Cropland and DeKalb will give us some numbers maybe before they make it all the way out so we can start seeing how they react to our environment. But our core set will generally go in about 18 to 20 different plots. So if we think about that spread and the data that can be generated from that, Tom mentioned earlier when you think about nitrogen practices, I guarantee you nobody in this room has probably got the same nitrogen program. The fertility isn't probably the same. The management, the fungicide, the micros, it's not the same program. So when we're able to take this and go 18 or 20 different locations across Superior Ag's a footprint, it gives us a lot of different looks at different environments that maybe that hybrid or that variety will really excel in. So starting here, when we start, I'll use Tom's reference here on post-harvest planting. Last year in 2023, how much late planted corn did we have? Very little, right? Everybody's shaking their heads. It was nice, got done. It wasn't too bad. So how does that differ from this year? Yeah, not fun. But one thing you learn in a lot of that, and especially because maybe in your area, there was a certain area that laid wet and you didn't get a plot out or you didn't get your corn out till into May. And that allows us, and I'll pick on this number, last year if you were in this stop, Tom and I spent a lot of time talking about 6 hybrids. And 5208 was one of those, and he really talked about how he thought it would replace some of our 5370 acres for what it was bringing to the table that we saw that year before. And I even referenced, we talked about 6270, both kind of a shorter season, handle some of that rougher acre, or kind of that good rolling acre, and it would do really well. What did we learn in last year's plot data, when all that numbers went out early, is maybe those weren't necessarily the best numbers for our early planted corn. So as you met with us this year and we developed your plan back in December and we had it all put together and then it turned into wet and it's still May 15th, May 20th, and it's like, I don't know if we're ever going to plant corn, but we need to reevaluate our maturity dates. So maybe we pulled out some of those fuller season hybrids, and having this kind of data allowed us to have a lot of confidence in switching maybe some of those acres to a 6270 or 5208, knowing that those hybrids are going to excel in that later planted environment and be able to handle it and how to manage it. So last thing here on this as we dive into Tom's point, and it's a whole story, but this is just looking at plot data. And it's fun when you do a plot because sometimes it's a good challenge because the plot doesn't represent the whole field. And it's one of those where, okay, well, did I put the right hybrid on there? So these are just for this plot set. So this isn't taking the expertise of the Superior Ag representative you work with that knows your fertility, that knows your nitrogen program, knows your management style, because when we put all those together, we can really get that right hybrid knowing how you're going to manage it. But so if we take this and just look at this data, Cropland and DeKalb were 5.8 advantage over the Pioneer in this instance, or our competitor, which in today's math is roughly $55 a bag. So to Tom's point of not necessarily, getting beat down on price and doing some of the things, there's really some value, and that's even without putting the knowledge of your local Superior Ag representative on your farm. 5-year average, I'll stick with the 475. That maybe represents our last 5. I wish that's what we were still looking at. But there we're talking an 8.7, and it will roughly generate almost $103 a bag in terms of what that value of those genetics and those hybrids are.
So it's about making money or not making money for next year. Unless some catastrophe happens and drives the corn market up, these are the decisions that we have to make now. So when I look at what they have access to in ag retail, like at Superior Ag, they've got access to all the national brands, right? And their best stuff. So if you are a company and you develop germplasm and traits and you're going to house whatever you think is best in your brand, right? Before you start selling it to your competition. And there's not a magical seed corn factory out there that makes corn hybrids $20 a bag less than another. It's all about a tier price. So when these companies look at it and they say, well, DeKalb, we want to keep the very best stuff in a DeKalb bag, and Corn States is ginormous. They developed a high percentage of the corn in the countryside, the same with Corteva. They're keeping what they can in their brands that they own, like DeKalb and Brevant, and then after that they start selling it. Well, with your guys' help and with Superior Ag's partnership with Winfield United, Winfield has been the largest customer of Bayer, Syngenta, Corteva, all these companies for everything that we're buying on the chemistry side. So we're their largest partner. So they want to work with us. So whenever we're looking at things with the Cropland brand, it's not a house brand or a regional. We're in there amongst them selecting the hybrids. So you guys have the full spectrum of the best stuff available on the market today. And then what happens is, it's like if you had a sale, you let your brother come look at it first. He's family. And then you start working your way down the list before you open it up. Well, these prices go down as they open it up because they've been picked through, right? So some other company, when they pick it up and they're in the mid-tier, it's been passed over probably by 10, 15 companies already. Not saying it's a bad product because it still advanced through the cycle and made it through the testing for a 24 or 25 launch, but there was something about it that wasn't as consistent as another. So then they look at, well, how can I do that? How do I market that? Well, I'm gonna have to be $10 a bag less in order to compete with that. And then obviously we want the best stuff for the price of the other stuff. Or they're gonna say, well, I'll wait a little while longer. I'll let everybody or let a whole bunch more companies pick what they're gonna put in their bag. And then I'm gonna come down here and I'm gonna buy it, come out and I'm gonna give them a bunch of free crap or a hopper bottom or whatever like that I can use to put in a value chain in there. And it's a real thing. It's not something that goes through. It's just where these prices are tiered out and the performance of the hybrids. So what Superior Ag is wanting to do this year, obviously you guys own this business. They're looking for a way to partner with you and they want to grow that. They see that as being extremely important for 2025, is they're going to reach into the pockets on margin and offer an extra incentive for an early commitment and growth. So we have two options here. You know, typically we had an 8% prepaid discount in November, and some of that would kind of hold out a little bit later until you figured out what the tax guy said. But we have to, this program here, we're going to make a hard commitment for October 4th. If you grow your corn order by 24 bags or you're a 100% customer, they're going to give you an extra 2.5% discount across all the brands and everything that you buy for them. Or you can roll it into the secure financing at 0.99%. So I know a couple of you guys in here pretty well, and you got money to swim in, and you might not need to borrow from a bank. But for the most part, generally it's expensive to farm, and we're looking at operating lines, you know, in that 7-8% or something like that. So in this situation, to get the 0.99% advantage for just 1 month earlier commitment, unless your credit score is as bad as my in-laws and you get a 50% interest rate to borrow money, this is a good deal. So it's going to allow you to access the top tier genetics and get an extra discount for the commitment.
And you can leverage your discounts from the supplier in terms of where you do with JDF.
Yeah.
On some of those,
you still get your full prepay discounts with this. It's not where we're going to give you 0.99 or 3% interest, but we're going to take your prepay from 10% to 4%. This is still allowing you to capture that, no different than if you would borrow that money from a bank or pull it out of a checking account. So we're kind of shift beans a little bit to beans. We talk a little bit about wind packs. You guys have probably heard of that. It's not a new thing. We've been doing it for several years, but it's actually a lot older than that. Some of the folks in here with some gray beards may remember that. But in the late 70s or early 80s, there were companies that were trying to do this because there was a yield advantage to it. But what happened was, if you got a guy that's buying seed or growing seed for you, and you have another guy that's growing seed for you and next door, and one's growing one component and one's growing the other, and you're going to mix them together. But Larry, yours is 2,400 seeds per pound, and yours is 2,900 seeds per pound. Well, we can't mix those together because golf balls and BBs don't work really good in a planter, right? So we end up having to go to Ohio to a seed producer and have to match the seed size with the stuff down here. And so we got to blend that together. So whenever we have the logistic expense for that, to do that, that's why the wind packs, usually there's $1 or $2 more in that. It's not because it's exclusive or we're trying to get more money out of you. It's just the simple rate of hauling the beans long distances to get the exact seed size to match.
So to kind of visit a little more on the wind pack story, as you guys think about it on your farm, for those of you that have done it, it really gives you a big advantage of working with Cropland on your soybeans. As you think about it, so a wind pack is set up at 2 different beans. And how many of you take these books home You all got it. It's our beautiful new seed guide. Chelsea did a phenomenal job with it. How many of you are studying it? There's a lot of data, there's a lot of ratings, there's a lot of fun things, right? Hopefully you're relying on a Spear Ag representative to manage and run through those. That's kind of my job, Tally's job, Jared's job. Our job is to really study that and understand it. But what really makes it good is you think about sitting in Tom's shoes as somebody from Winfield when they go to figure out how are we going to put two beans together to maximize that wind pack to create the best wind pack we can. So think about it here as component A. So relative maturities are going to be the same. We're not going to take a 3.3 and blend it with a 3.8 and call it a 3.6. That wouldn't work. It would be terrible in the fall. Everybody'd be cussing. So, but relatively, all 3.5s, 3.6s, or 3.6s, here's our 3620. So we got one component that is really, really strong in yield. And then as we look at it, it starts lacking in some of those disease tolerances. So how would we make that bean better? Well, if we take it and pair it with component B, who still brings a strong yield environment to it, maybe doesn't have quite the top end as our first component, but then it brings a great disease tolerance to it. So if we think about as the disease gets in a field and settles in your soybeans, if there's a bean out there that has got a little more resistance already naturally built into it, we're less likely to see that spread throughout. Because as that bean's going to spread, it's going to sit in your field, and as Tom would say, it's going to rub together. The wind's maybe going to blow it around. But if half that field can fight it a little bit, that'll eliminate some of that disease pressure we get. So when you go out and make that management decision to spray that fungicide to keep that bean healthy or try to put a little suppression on a frog eye, it allows you to go out and maybe treat and prevent rather than go try to make an emergency, I've already lost half my canopy. So it gives us a lot of strength there, and it helps diversify that. The other way to look at it too is also, as we think about it, is looking at yield. So pick out, you got one variety over here that makes up the wind pack, one variety over here that makes up the wind pack. Then we have the wind pack. So those are all in the same plots. If we think about our plot sheets, we get typically this time of year as it starts going, or like Tom said, shows up on your Facebook feed or whatever it is. Here's variety B, won 6 out of 9. That's pretty good, right? I mean, if we got a sheet in the mail that said, I won, or this variety, this hybrid, won 6 out of 9 times, that'd be pretty good.
Well, they don't say 6 out of 9. They say 2/3 or 66%.
Yeah, it won
so
70%
like
of the time.
7,000 plots. But
yeah, it won 70% of the time this variety wins. But if we look at it, it's kind of boom or bust, isn't it? It either won or it came in last out of the 3. And as we look at it overall, when we average it all out, it came in 3rd. So for you guys, we talked about how important it is to manage your hybrids and get those on the right acre and how we manage those. How many of you manage your soybean acre that way? Do we go put 20 beans or 20 units of beans and go plant this field, then we clean out the planter and let's go plant this over here? We don't, right? We kind of fill up the wagon or we grab the box and we say, okay, this 40, this 100 acres over here, that all kind of lays the same. We're going to go with this bean. So this is one of the advantages of the wind packs, because if we think about how we do that and we spread it out, well, here's variety A. It did a good job. You know, it won a couple, came in 3rd a couple times, but it was pretty there. It kind of rang the bell, right? It was reliable. And as we evaluate things, we want something that we can count on and that's super reliable for us. But when we put it together, we gain an extra bushel. And so if you're able to put an extra bushel by just combining those two beans, that adds up. I think, Tom, in our last break, we were talking, I think you said the national average is over 2.
The national average for the wind pack, component A versus component B versus the pack, it's 2.1 bushel. So if you think about it, you've got, that's, I don't know how many thousands of replications, that's 10 foot wide and 25 foot long. How much variability do you think is in that versus a field, right? In the field situations, it does a really good job. Actually had a guy in the group this morning that it reminded me of a funny story. He called me one time and he was going to dig in my butt about this wind pack that I sold him, because half of the pack is ready. The gray beans ready to cut and the brown beans, it's too wet to cut. And I was like, good. He's like, well, that wasn't the way this butt chewing was expected to go, but tell me where you talking. It's like, because that other one died prematurely. So in a greenhouse environment, the maturities are going to be identical and you're not going to see that. But if we ever see that situation where one is extended out a few days over another one, it's because it did what it was supposed to do and it carried out through the end. So you won't see a big difference in harvestability or anything on that unless something bad happens. Other than that, it's going to be maturing at the same time.
Anybody have any questions for us? Otherwise, We have some corn hybrids, but he gave us a minute ago, a while back, so I assume we're right on the 20 seconds. So we got a question,
Perfect.
or we got hopefully first in the food line.
I did have something
Thank us
quick,
later.
is real quick, the supply on some of the products this year is a lot better. Last year we had a big genetic jump in corn, but we didn't have enough of it, right? But this year the supply looks pretty solid on the new genetics. So
Yeah, because like to his point on some of these hybrids that we're looking at percent of mean, some of these new genetics that we've had a tough time getting our hands on need to find spots on the farm. There's too much yield there to not look at it.